Welcome, everyone, to the Q&A session for our upcoming course, The Divine Map of Human Consciousness, the 8-week journey to unleash the full capacity of your mind through the hidden wisdom of Kabbalistic tradition. I'm Lisa Bonis, and it's my honor to be hosting this Q&A conversation for the Shift Network, where we'll explore the teachings of Rav Doniel Katz and address questions about his upcoming 8-week course, The Divine Map of Human Consciousness, which begins Wednesday, July 24th. And a little later, I'll explain how you can participate in this course, even if you can't attend the live sessions. But first, I want to introduce our guest. Rav Doniel Katz is a visionary educator, internationally sought-after speaker, and the creative force behind the Elevation Project. For more than a decade, Rav Doniel's open and compassionate teachings have been a catalyst for change in the lives of thousands of people worldwide. Born and raised in Australia, Rav Doniel abandoned his award-winning film and theater career in his mid-20s after a year of intensive spiritual awakening. Exploring many wisdom paths and traditions in search of deeper clarity to explain his experiences, he was finally led to Jerusalem in 2000, and since then, he's spent nearly 2 decades immersed in the world of Torah and Kabbalistic teachings, learning from some of the city's great rabbis and spiritual masters. And in just a few minutes, we're going to open up for your questions. But first, I want to welcome Rav Doniel, who's going to begin by sharing an opening teaching. Welcome, Rav Doniel. It's a delight to have you with us today.
Shalom, shalom. Hello, Lisa. Hello, everybody. It's really an honor and a privilege to be speaking to you from halfway around the world, spending some time together in the next hour. Thank you so much for joining us with an open heart and open mind. Lisa asked me to say a few words. I thought I'd share a little story. The great Jewish mystic, he's a kind of a shaman, really, called Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. He had a saying that many people in the world tell their children stories to put their children to sleep. He said, but we need to tell our stories to wake our children up. That's why we tell stories. So I have a story for you, and it's from a long time ago in my life. I often joke and say it's a past life in the same body. And while I often discuss reincarnation, that's not what I mean. When I was 23, 24, I did not look like this. I didn't have much connection to my own Jewish heritage. I was a spiritual seeker. I was a film director and theater director. And I was seeking in all the places in the world. I did into Buddhism and Sufism and Hinduism and a lot of fascinating other isms. And I ended up at one period of my life, around 24, actually at a 10-day Buddhist meditation retreat. It was quite intensive and profound. You basically did technically 2 techniques, but it was from 4 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. You basically sat on a pillow day and night in a very, very simple technique over and over again. And the goal was, as we know quite well, is to clear our mind of thoughts and clear our mind of the noise and all the thoughts that are rising up from our body, from our emotions, and to basically not give them attention. And they used a body scan technique. And it, for the first 3 or 4 days, it was quite difficult. I remember at some points it was actually physically excruciating. At one point, I kid you not, I could actually no longer find my nose on my face. It was from just giving my attention to my nose and inhaling and exhaling literally for days at a time from 4 o'clock in the morning till 9, 10 o'clock at night. You kind of lose an awareness of one's own body, which some can be exhilarating and some it can be quite frightening and disorientating, as I'm sure you can imagine. Around day 4 or 5, perhaps 5 or 6, I began to cross the threshold from my body awareness and had a very, very profound opening into non-dual consciousness, higher states. And you're constantly struggling, as is the technique that they teach, with so many things are coming up and fears and body pains and a lifetime of trauma and all these kind of interesting things. And the goal is basically not to give it attention and transcend it. And the core question, why does anyone come to an ashram? Why does anyone go to a meditation retreat is because we're seeking the larger answers and the larger experience, and a moment of transcendence. And I was blessed that, a moment the heavens opened and I began to do that. And I began to get this incredible light and energy. And that's a whole other story. That's not the part, ironically, I want to tell you today. Something very troubling happening to me around the 6th day. And what it was I was actually writing a film script at this moment in my life, and had actually been suffering. If you've ever been a creative artist and had, writer's block or any kind of creative block, painter's block, musical composition block, I don't know what it's called in that world, writer's block as well, I guess. I'd been actually writing a feature film script for coming on 2 years. And I had, tremendous blocks in trying to understand what was the motivation of the hero and how should the second act resolve itself as it transitions to the third act. And around the 6th day of this meditation retreat, in a very, very high state, suddenly I got this unbelievable vision of the entire second act, literally in a second, this unbelievable download. Not only did I just get the idea of how to resolve it, I saw the shots, I saw the cinematography, the mise en scène, the lighting, I saw exactly what actors should play it, and I understood the key motivation and a much better way to begin the film, a much more powerful, incredible kind of opening scene with twists and turns. And suddenly I realized, well, this has to be the final shot because the beginning of the movie must end with the final shot. I had this incredible revelation. And I realized that as I was sitting there in a state, suddenly for 2 hours, I was watching the movie in real time, seeing it all come together. And I got this, everyone knows about kind of Christian guilt, or I don't know, it's really the same thing, Jewish guilt. But maybe this was Buddhist guilt. I don't know what this was. Of why was I falling into all the world of delusions and screenwriting and filmmaking? I want to transcend this, and I pushed it away, and I pushed up out, and I was in there, and suddenly this download to another movie. I had this incredible movie that I was working on. I hadn't really spent time at it, but suddenly I was watching real-time scenes, like in VR, 3D, watching the entire scene and going, that's an incredible scene. What a movie. What a brilliant idea. And I'm watching it, getting incredible storylines and twists and turns, download. And then suddenly I realize I'm getting caught in that. I push it out and I watch another scene. I push it out and I watch another scene. I spent a whole day watching these movies in my head, and I felt so blessed. I felt like I was getting a lifetime of downloads of incredible next generation cinema, but I also felt this guilt. I'm getting caught in the samsara. There's this idea of the noise of this world, of the push and pull, the chaos of this world, because when the download's coming in, it's bringing up all the things I'm focusing on, right? The light is coming in, it's bringing up the things I'm focusing on, and therefore it's being filtered. The revelation is being filtered through my worldly things. So I pushed it out and it came back, and I pushed it out and it came back. And I got to a point when I had this little existential crisis on the little pillow in the ashram, and it was like, why am I pushing away? Maybe this is better. Maybe who says the transcendence is better? Maybe I want the download, and I didn't know how to resolve that. A lot of interesting things happened in my life in those 10 days. But what I want to tell you is, months and months later, when I reflected on that interesting challenge, that interesting situation, I realized that in truth, what I had been seeking on the ashram was an experience of transcendence. And I was blessed to get the first, and certainly not the last, nor either the highest, but the first moment of transcendence in my life from that. And I left feeling that I'd wasted my experience, because I really kind of drew it down into filmmaking and film scripts and art and creativity. It was literally years later before an even higher supernatural experience happened to me, which is not really for today. Today's really for your questions, your answers. But there's something I'd like to share as an introduction, is when I came to Jerusalem and I started learning Torah, and I started learning a particular Kabbalah, and I learned a story about someone who's in the Torah, in the Bible, called Hanoch. And Hanoch was a person way back in, close to the beginning of creation and the original spiritual masters, who's known as becoming such a high spiritual master, according to the sages of the Torah tradition, that when he died, when he ascended, not only did his soul go up, but his physical being went up as well. And our sages discuss, what did this master do to achieve a level that it wasn't just his body went down into the ground and his soul and his higher consciousness ascended, but the physicality was so bonded and unified with the spirituality that they both ascended together. And what it says is a very profound thing, I think is particularly profound in 2019 and our generation, 2020, into the next 10 years, whenever you're watching this program on the Shift Network. What it said is that he was a shoemaker. And as he was a shoemaker, every stitch that he made of the shoe, he would bind heaven and earth together. And that was his intent. And he did that with such a profound degree that the shoes always represent the physical body in Kabbalah, because most of our body is not the shoe. The shoe is just the one part that interfaces with the ground, but the being, the consciousness within that. So as he made the shoe, as he built and constructed the body, he made it for other people with such love, such mindful attention, such profound higher super consciousness, that he would bring that super consciousness into every action that he did. And it was the binding of the transcendent state and the physical immanent state which caused him in his own being to unify his physical, his emotional, his intellectual, and his spiritual into one. And then I thought back and I realized what I experienced on the ashram, and it was like the depth of a seeking 24-year-old seeking that transcendent experience, which is so important, so necessary, so profound. And I found incredible tools to take that to the next level in Kabbalah and Torah. But not until I got to Kabbalah and Torah, I truly understood the teaching for myself and my own journey, was that the idea that Torah is saying is we should not write film scripts. Most Hollywood films are lame. Hope I'm not insulting any Hollywood filmmakers out there, because they're really regurgitations of the same stories we've seen 1,000 times, copies of other films we've seen. But every now and then a work of art, a piece of music, a piece of cinema comes in which is so new, which is so fresh, which is so inspired, and or a musical or a piece of music. So much music is just, off the press. It's just a machine, cookie cutter kind of music. But every now and then you come across about artists that you really feel, for lack of a better word, is channeling. And what I realized that the Torah was teaching, and this was my insight at the time, it was a path of how to directly experience transcendence, but then to bring that down into the nitty-gritty details of life, into the daily physical experiences, that the physical experiences themselves would become supernatural, transcendent experience, that we can come up with ideas for entrepreneurial endeavors for businesses. We could use that divine inspiration to guide us in life decisions. We can, our script should be written that way, and our business should be run that way, and our partners and relationships of love and our children should be taught to do those things. And it's not just about the transcendent supernatural experience, but it's actually living with that on a constant level in all the details of life. And so what I've done is, coming back to today's discussion, what I've done in the last few years is to map out on a very comprehensive level what are all the elements of consciousness a person needs to know and needs to master, to not just access that in the deepest place, in the deepest way, but to really maintain that in a transformational way in life, on the levels of body and the levels of emotion, the levels of intellect and imagination, and to channel those and harness those together, not just to go out, but to draw in and to express beyond ourselves to the world. So that's a little of what we've done with the Elevation Project. Is that's the project that we founded and directed to spread these teachings in the world, and we're so thrilled to be partnering with Shift to share today in the coming weeks some of those teachings together. And that's a little what I wanted to share with you, that the goal from many traditions, and what I've learned so much in the Torah tradition, is to learn to access the highest experience, but learn to bring that down into the details of life, into making money, into sexuality, into eating, and the transformation that happens is truly profound and unique. And that's a little of what I hope we're going to be able to share and learn together with in the coming weeks. Lisa?
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. I can feel the inspiration. I can feel your vibe all the way around the other side of the planet. So thank you for sharing that. And while I'm mentioning the other side of the planet, we're having a little bit of internet issues. Just wanted everyone to know that's why it's a big world and he's coming from far away.
It's amazing the internet makes it so far. Let's just have a little gratitude that some of the sound gets there along the way, at least.
Yes, yeah. The sound is fine. The video is just a little jerky, but we'll make it through. No problem at all. I want to mention to everyone we have the rest of our time together to dive into your questions for Rav Doniel as we prepare for his upcoming course. Again, that's called The Divine Map of Human Consciousness, and it begins Wednesday, July 24th. And if you want to check out the website and learn more about the 8-week course, you can visit divinemapofhumanconsciousness.com to see the full description. So let's go ahead and get started with questions. They're pouring in. If you have a question for Rav Doniel, go ahead and type it in. I'll be happy to read them aloud. Meantime, let's go ahead and start.
I just want to encourage people, do not hold back. I know I've seen all these people out there in the Facebook world, and they're sitting back watching. Life is not a spectator sport. And if you're brave enough, if you're really struggling with something, if you really want to throw a curveball, if you really want to throw something authentic about your own journey, about something happening in the world, I'm not claiming I can answer all your questions, but it's always fun to open up and have a discussion together. So I encourage you to be bold and be brave and share something, and let's see where it takes us. Your contribution can take everything we're doing to the next level. So I'm here for you for the next few minutes. I'm looking forward to having some fun and sharing some deep teachings together.
Okay, well, terrific. Thanks for that dare.
The pep talk.
Let's go to
yes.
We've got a question here from Sherry, who says, in one of your videos, you said that there are 3 things that one does not need to forgive. What are those 3 things?
I've seen that question going around for a long time. That's a little complex to get into right now. But the core of the teaching, the idea that halacha is the kind of legal guidelines part of the Torah. There's the mystical side, and there's the details and the spiritual guides, particularly legal points. That's called halacha. Now, some people say, I'm into the spiritual side, but I'm not into the legal side, or I'm not into the detailed side, the commandment side. But the truth is, any spiritual master has rules and laws that they live by. Every spiritual master is wise and skillful about how they interact with reality, how they interact with relationships, how they interact with food, how they interact with business, what their relationship is to the energy of time, the energy of the week, the energy of the day, and how to make the most of these opportunities. So Torah actually has very profound things, and most people that are usually put off by the boring legal side, it's just usually, and I notice for myself as well, they've never really sought or had the opportunity to learn the spiritual depth of the teachings. So forgiveness is part of halacha, and the laws of forgiveness are part of the Jewish legal system. For a venue like this, I'll be very, very brief without going into all the complexity, because I don't want to bore the crowd. As we know, and we hear a lot in New Age teachings and spiritual teachings, forgiveness is extremely important, not for the person that you need to forgive, but for yourself. Because when you hold on to bitterness, when you hold on to resentfulness, it's extremely spiritually, psychologically, and physically damaging. Our Torah sages have taught us that for thousands of years. Today, science is finally getting on the bandwagon and can talk about how much the body is affected by people's repressed anger or pain. And that's now, in the world of science, this whole field's opening up that explore the relationships between mind and consciousness and the body. So forgiveness is very important for relationships building. And finally, ultimately, we are all one consciousness, and to have schisms between individuals is personally, psychologically destructive and spiritually destructive for the planet and the human race, etc. And primarily, many people that have physical disorders and emotional, blocks in their life that they can't get past, one of the core reasons for them is the lack of forgiveness to somebody in their life. And when you do that work, it can be truly transformative and truly healing on an unparalleled level. Where the halacha is cautious about, and I'm going to say this, I'm not here to be critical about anyone and any person's teachings, but there can sometimes be an overemphasis on forgiving everybody always, all the time. And there are sometimes we have to choose not to forgive people. And often that's about an educational process for another. If there is somebody that is deliberately doing something to you again and again and are highly destructive, highly manipulative, and you sense that they're doing it knowing you'll forgive them, you'll get over it, and then they can do it again, then it is not helpful to them, and certainly not helpful to yourself, to allow that forgiveness to come in. Because sometimes there's a reason that we need to hold on to something. Now, with that, that's a very complex thing, because there's some people that are psychologically damaged by the bitterness and resentfulness they have towards another, right? But they say, you know what, I'm not going to give them forgiveness. I'm going to put up that boundary of saying you're unforgiven because I need to teach them and I need to show them. And really, they don't. And really, that's damaging. But just as that is true, we have to be nuanced and sophisticated in our spiritual development so that our teachings are not actually destructive to others, God forbid. There are times based on individuals who show no remorse, who show zero ownership, where there can be benefit to maintain that. But you have to be clear that of how you do it, that that they have the capacity to hear and that they have a capacity to change ultimately, and a reason to believe that your approach with them by not giving the forgiveness can open up a new opportunity for them. So there are nuanced laws in there about when to forgive and when not to forgive. If we want, we could do a whole course on that. But as much as we need to teach the importance of the essential psycho-spiritual process of forgiveness and why it's absolutely necessary, we have to be reasonable spiritual teachers. People often assume that all spiritual development is about love, light, and unity, right? And we have to be open to unified with all. That is not the truth. That is not the truth, certainly from Torah Kabbalah's perspective. The truth is we need to know as spiritual beings when to be open and unified and when to create boundaries and healthy limitations. And the true spiritual master knows the harmony, which is called Tiferet, between interconnectivity and openness and forgiveness and love, and appropriate boundaries and appropriate distance. If you're very spiritually sensitive, and empathetic, what's the term I'm looking for? When you tune into other people, empathic is the word, then you sometimes suffer in your life from an overabundance of I'm connected to everyone, I'm absorbing everything. So there are times when we have to absorb and connect, but there are times we have to create boundaries. And therefore the guidelines about forgiveness is definitely we need to learn how to forgive, and we need to use that frequently. And there's actually a deep prayer in Kabbalah that Torah Jews actually say every night before they go to bed, which is to forgive energetically and release anything anyone's ever done to you during the day. But we always hold in mind that the value of the times when not to do it. And a person needs to be a little bit more sensitive and needs a little guidance about when that's necessary. My guess that the person asking this question, there is no questions asked in a bubble. It's a big rule. And they've probably had some very intense things happen to them in their life. And I can feel a little what's going on there. Part of it because they keep asking this question. It's a very key question for them. And I just want to send a message to them that you're going to have to let go. I don't know this person. This is what I can sense. You're going to have to let go of this. It's gone deep, right? You have to make sure you're not in any danger in a short term, long term. I believe it's deep in your past. I believe it's deep in your history from what I can sense. But there's absolutely a point that you must release. And now is the time has come. But now is the time has gone. You need to heal and you need to move on. But you need to assess that you may have to make sure there's a boundary to keep yourself protected, and that no danger should come from that person, that individual, to you. And as long as that is safe and intact, the time has come for you to do the work. That's what I feel I need to say there. Okay, Lisa, how did I do?
That was pretty good stuff, and it leads to another question from a different person on the same topic or a similar topic. Alice is asking, how can I pray to stop and control my husband's aggression toward me when we're in that struggling moment? I just thought this was an interestingly timed question after what you were just saying.
Yes. I do think those things go together well. I don't know well is the right word. Hello, Alice. I'm sorry to hear the situation you're in. I love doing question and answers, but I hate doing question and answers. And what I mean by this is I love having real-time dialogues with people. If I don't know you, then I have to be cautious of what I'm saying, and I have to keep the answer safe in general, Alice. But I would hate to think that a soul like yours is receiving aggression from your husband. Rule number 1, don't go into spiritual abstract override about real life dangers and emergencies, okay? That means if you're asking that question, I would like to assume that you are safe, that you are not in any danger, that your husband has mild issues like some people do of anger, frustration, but you're not really at risk, and God forbid you're not in an abusive situation. If you are, then I do not want to give you spiritual advice. I want to give you practical advice, or allow me to say sometimes practical advice is spiritual advice, okay? Then you need what we just discussed, as Lisa is indicating. You need healthy boundaries. You need to get guidance. You need to get support outside of the relationship from counselors, therapists, from friends. And you need to make sure that you are not just physically safe, but psychologically safe and healthy, that you have strong self-esteem, that you have strong love, that and everything else that goes with that package. And I hope you have the resources and or know how to find them to make sure you're safe and healthy in that sense. Assuming that you mean all things being equal, complications come up in marriages all the time, and sometimes people get upset. So the core two things are about changing yourself and changing the other. And the only smart thing to say on the subject is, before you change the other, you have to change yourself. Okay? And that doesn't mean that you are guilty, God forbid, or necessarily the cause of the aggression. I don't know the relationship. But certainly what you have to make sure is that whatever comes up in a marriage, right? We all think that marriage is about, love and connection and peace and intimacy. And we kid ourselves going into marriage thinking that's what it will be. Yeah, I know it's going to be hard work, but at the end of the day, that's the game. And the truth is, the Torah sages say that marriage is about two diamonds coming together to be polished, because a diamond is something so beautiful and precious, but so strong that the only thing that can polish it is another diamond. So the essence of marriage is diamond polishing, and diamonds represent the souls. So as two souls are coming together, and they're going to rub against each other to polish each other, to make their divinity illuminated and shine. But to do that, the perfect marriage will always mean that your weakness will trigger his weakness, and his greatest weakness will trigger your greatest weakness. And many people go, I'm getting out of such a marriage. The truth is that's the secret behind the best marriages. So the first thing you need to do is take ownership for your stuff. And God forbid, I'm not talking about if there's a really abusive marriage, do not take this advice. It's dangerous. If it's a good marriage, healthy, but all things being equal, everyone has their challenges, fine. So the question is, when his stuff comes up in life, what does it trigger within you? That you feel you're being abandoned, that you feel you're a victim, that you feel you're overwhelmed, that you feel you can't stand up for yourself. So I want you to begin to tune in to what is your core feeling that happens in the time of challenge in relationships, and to realize that nothing should ever knock you out of your divinity. That's what we're going to learn together, how to do that, how to master in the program. Nothing should ever knock you out of what's called your da'as, your higher consciousness, your ability to be creative, to be loving, to be open, to be proud, to be connected, to be grounded, to be expansive, to be compassionate. Your goal is to maintain that. If something is coming up, we always blame the partner. We always want to point our finger at the partner, right? And it's you're making me feel all those things. But the core is nobody can make me feel anything that's not already there to be triggered inside me. So that becomes the core question, Alice. The core question is, when he's doing his thing, what is that? What is coming up for you? How can you own that? Learn from that, transform that, and then enter into a new place. And if you went to a new place of courage, of strength, of love, of compassion, then you would be a different person in that scenario. And you would probably have the resourcefulness and the resilience and the energy to shift the dynamic itself. I'm not guaranteeing anything. I'm just showing you approach. That's the first thing. The second thing is, both externally and internally, can we shift our partner? Should we try and shift our partner? Should we try and get them to change consciously, unconsciously? Should we try and shift the furniture to cause change in their life? How can we spiritually use our minds to affect them? And all these things are possible. That the number one thing for a partner, and let's be wise, we're all women here, aren't we? You have to be very, very careful with trying to change a husband. If a husband thinks you're trying to change him, his ego gets triggered super fast. You have to be very, very skillful and smart and subtle about these approaches. Right? Prayer is supernaturally powerful. In Torah and Kabbalah, the consciousness of each partner and their own perfection knocks their partner to a higher level and a different level, especially with men towards women for a much deeper reason. Men complain about the women all day, but the Torah teachers say if you don't like the woman, she's going to be a reflection of yourself, and you have to take ownership for your issues rather than, God forbid, pointing the finger of your wife, who only needs to be honored and cherished. That's honor and cherishing is the essence, according to the Torah sages, of the male towards the feminine. So it takes a lot of subtlety and sensitivity of how to work with a husband. The first thing you do is take ownership for your stuff. That's always rule number 1, and rule number 2 and 3, all the way to 10 and 100 and 1,000. Once you've got that in place, I want you to look, once you've worked through that, when you get the skill set, when you have the tools, then the goal is to tune into your husband and ask your own self intuitively to answer the question. What could you give? What love, give, attention, insight could you offer him, and presence of mind can you offer him that will allow him to feel loved enough and comforted enough to have that self-reflection? Some men are very into inner work and development, but let's be honest, most men are not. So the question is, how do you push them into an area where it's possible that they can feel safe enough to have the self-reflection to begin to change? That's a long discussion. But tuning into their own fear and learning how to release that for yourself is part of that conversation. But that's a little bit more sophisticated skill set. We'll have to get there another time. I hope, Alice, that's enough to get you thinking and moving in a new direction. You should be blessed to have tremendous breakthroughs in your marriage and tremendous love and connection as well. Amen.
Wow, that was such a powerful response to a challenging question. Thank you so much for that. For those of you who are just joining us, we're here with Rav Doniel Katz, learning about his upcoming course, The Divine Map of Human Consciousness, which begins Wednesday, July 24th. And you can log on to divinemapofhumanconsciousness.com for all the details and to register. So let's get back into some questions so we can hear some more amazing answers. This question comes from Philip, and he's asking about the conversation that you had with Stephen Dinan, where you talked about just a vast array of things. Philip says, my ears perked up when you talked about ADHD and being able to concentrate without drugs. Would you please talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Philip, was it? Hi, Philip. How are you doing? This is a very interesting question. The amount of children that we drug up in our generation due to ADHD. Listen, I'm not against medical drugs. I think we have to be highly cautious of the use and overuse of drugs like this, and of course within our own children. I think some of the expectations our society has about what a person's supposed to be doing with their days and their lives and what we expect of children is, it's safe to say, unhealthy assumptions which lead to unhealthy assessments about the flaws in our children, which make drugs seem like the only possible outcome. And of course, this is not just an issue for children, but adults as well. ADHD is a very deep thing. I just want to let you know, in the actual course we're doing, we actually have a whole 2 sessions exactly on this subject. Because it's an optical illusion. What it means from a Torah perspective is we're going to see that there's 10 core parts of human consciousness, okay? And within every individual, different parts of the consciousness, the 10 core parts will be stronger and different parts will be weaker. There's only very few individuals or masters where each of the parts are equally strong. Now, with that in mind, some strengths of some of the population is in the intellectual, rational, analytical mind. That they have strong, not just long-term memory, but short-term memory. If you give them a telephone number and tell them to add 4 numbers to it, they'll remember that as well. And they can function by focusing on all the details of the conversation, all the details of the data that's being presented. If they read the article in the newspaper, they'll remember all the facts and information. That's how some people that's how some people function. And the assumption we make is that's how all people function. And if they don't, well, there's something broken. From a Torah perspective, that's not at all true. There are some people that are deeply emotional people. And when they read the newspaper about the challenge, they'll resonate with the emotions of the story, but not remember the facts. There are other people that consider themselves ADHD, and what they actually have is a lower level of something called das tachton. That's the scientific technical word in Torah. And a lower level of bina, but they often have a higher level of something called dimyon and a higher level of midas, of leiv, of heart emotion and imagination. What you find is, if you strip such people out of the expectations of a Western educational model, what you find is people with ADHD may be bad at X, Y, and Z, but they're very, very good at emotional resonance, at empathy, of creativity, of bringing in new ideas and insights. They're extremely intuitive about people. They're visionary in many different ways. And actually, according to the Baal Shem Tov, one of the great shamans, Kabbalistic teachers of all of history, he actually said, I'm not even going to begin to teach you what he said. he actually says about David HaMelech, King David, who's known, by the way, for not just being a very high-level intuitive person, but also he wrote poetry, he wrote psalms. He was a deeply poetic soul. And what the Baal Shem Tov says about him, he says he actually has ADHD. The Baal Shem Tov said about King David, it's a very astonishing thing to say, that he was trying to be strategic as a king, but he couldn't make his mind think straight. He couldn't make his mind go in a linear way. Every time he thought something was going to happen, something else was happening. And every time he tried to map it out one way, the other thing was happening, and he couldn't keep his mind straight. What the Baal Shem Tov says is he learned to use his intuition. He learned to use Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration, because for his skill set, rational, linear, intellectual thinking was not his strength. Now, hold in mind that David HaMelech and King David on a Kabbalistic level is one of the 7 great souls of human history. And in fact, he's the final revelation. He represents the manifestation and revelation of divinity in the physical world. That's his particular energy. So rather than just being a theoretical, intellectual genius mastermind, what he was a highly intuitive soul. And the Baal Shem Tov says he developed his intuition so it actually became more powerful than most people's intellect. So what I found is there are actually skill sets that I teach. A couple of the very powerful ones I'm going to teach in this particular program. Other programs online, I teach other models as well. But in the shift model, I'm going to learn, I think, the second or third class, a very powerful technique for people with ADHD. Not only will they be able to concentrate for an extended period of time uninterrupted, and you can, if you're in the program, you'll check this out and you'll tell me if I'm right or wrong. When I teach this class in seminars, retreats all around the world to thousands of people, literally tens of thousands of people have done this. Most people with ADHD can actually focus better using this exercise than people without ADHD that have normal thinking. So what happens is if you learn, ADHD people have a deeper sense of understanding, of insight, they can use much more intuition, potential psychic ability, more emotional resonance, but they have to learn what these other abilities are and how to strengthen those muscles. Because often in standard school and educational models, you're taught to only think in one way, in this little box: rational, linear thinking, strong memory skills, etc. Right? So that means you've got 2 problems. That means you're taught to do something that you're not good at doing, and you're not taught to do all the rest of those things that you could be doing. So one of the things that we teach people in our programs around the world who are suffering ADHD is A, how to strengthen a little bit more the muscles to do better what they have to do, but also how to turn on and strengthen the skill sets that they kind of wing their way through, but they don't usually know how to fully harness. So that's a little what we're going to teach. There's incredible potential within the divine soul model of the world, which is called Shorish Neshamas, that people around the world all have unique gifts and skills and abilities. For the final revelation to happen in the world, what we call Geula, that humanity will reach its true perfection. Every different individual and every different soul type will have to become fully mastered, fully revealed with their unique skill sets. So society will never function in its perfection in the political arena, in the educational arena, in the scientific arena, in all these arenas that humanity is facing, unless all different peoples of different innate skill sets and sensitivities are able to fully make their contribution. Just like in today, we see a tremendous force of female energy rising up in the world. The Zohar says explicitly 2,000 years ago that one of the signs of the final revelation of human perfection will be the rising up of the feminine energy. And so one of the things I think is obviously everyone looks in the world today, we see women who are often not in a place of empowerment, not in a place of opportunity, who are suddenly be giving opportunity. And what always troubles me is the women want to step to become a CEO. So she wants to be a CEO like a man. And we don't need more men CEOs, whether they're men or women, right? We need, how would a woman use feminine energy to be CEO? How would that company be? How would that government be? So the goal is that when a person comes into power, they don't come into power mimicking something else they thought they were supposed to be, but they come into power with their own unique gifts. So I believe that ADHD people could be trained how to live a life on their own skill set and their own terms by understanding the 10 dimensions of their own consciousness and how to recognize and harness their skill sets better. And I think that's going to be part of the next revolution of human consciousness is giving power back to those people, because they have very unique gifts which can really evolve much faster the human process and the evolutionary process of humanity. That ended on quite a big epic note, but I do believe with all my heart that's true. So that's something to consider. I hope that answers Philip's question. How did that go for you, Philip? Lisa?
Well, I don't know how Philip felt about it, but I sure got a lot out of that one. Thank you for that. I'll be watching for that module specifically. And looking at the clock here, we have time for a few more questions. But before we take those, I want to give a few details about the course itself. People are asking questions about that as well, so I'll go ahead and answer those. Once again, the course is called The Divine Map of Human Consciousness. And this is going to be not only life-changing, but fascinating and entertaining, an 8-week journey under Rav Doniels' expert guidance, where you'll receive ancient Kabbalistic practices to release negative emotional buildup and clear energy blocks and all kinds of interesting things. The 8-week course takes place on Wednesdays at noon Pacific, starting Wednesday, July 24th. And if you can't join us live, that's fine. You won't miss the teachings. You will receive both audio and video recordings, transcripts, and all course handouts on your course homepage. And also, just a quick reminder that the Shift Network offers a no-risk money-back guarantee on all of our courses, giving you a full 2 weeks until August 7th in this case to make sure that you absolutely love it. We want you to be happy. And as an added option, all participants are welcome to connect in a private Facebook community group so you can stay connected with one another. Also, everyone who registers receives the Divine Map of Human Consciousness bonus collection. First, you'll receive a live, intensive, experiential video session with Rav Doniel Katz entitled Divine Map of Human Consciousness. Next, you'll participate in a live, extended Q&A session with Rav Doniel. And then you'll receive foundational PDFs from Rav Doniel, which is a package of Kabbalah charts and handouts. And finally, you'll get an audio dialogue with Rabbi David Ingber and Mirabai Starr entitled The God of Love. And when you register by midnight Pacific on Thursday, July 18th, you will receive this extra gift, and that is an audio dialogue with Rabbi David Ingber and Daniel Matt entitled The God of No Thing. So before we get back into questions, Rav Doniel, let me ask, what are you most looking forward to sharing in your upcoming course?
There's so much deep wisdom. There's so many deep teachings. I mean, and I feel so blessed to have spent the last 20 years of my life having my mind blown about what's out there, what's here, what's being taught here, what's in all these holy works and holy books that I'm surrounded by in my study. And 8 sessions is not so much, and I'm looking to give a download. I think, what I'm most looking forward to is just the wows on people's faces. The teachings are really impactful. I'm not saying that from an ego place. The teachings are not from me, they're from our tradition. And there's nothing more beautiful that to give people clarity on themselves. Knowledge is power, but self-knowledge is the ultimate power. When we give a person an understanding of who they truly are, explaining their consciousness, explaining their emotions with such clarity, it's such a lucid model. And to see people with ADHD really suddenly be able to go, oh my gosh, my mind can do that. I just never knew. To see people with blocks of their life really be able to release it super fast. Many people have said to me, I'm always cautious to say this out loud, I've spent 10 years in therapy or 20 years of therapy, I couldn't get that breakthrough. And it's only in one session, there is that release. I look forward to, as a teacher, that flash in a person's eyes of wow, of this hope. The Torah understanding is that you can be given a piece of technology and given a machine, but you don't know how to fully use it until you get the instruction manual. And the instruction manual explains the machine, explains the technology. Now, the greatest technology we have in the world is human consciousness, and it can do unbelievable things. But many people, were never given an instruction manual. They were never given this is how it works. So the Torah, and specifically Kabbalah, is literally designed as a blueprint and instruction manual of human consciousness. So to empower people with that. It's so lucid, it's so profound. For lack of a better term, it's divine, that the wisdom that it brings, the insight and the opportunity that it opens up for people, even people that expect to be beyond the possibility for opportunity. So that's what I'm most excited to teach, is that model, to show applications for people in their lives, that they can experience the blow out of their body experiences, and they can see really profound change happen in their heart and their mind and their consciousness, and to take whatever spiritual teachings they have, whatever wisdom they already have, totally to the next level, and to give them hope and the excitement and that adrenaline rush of what's possible for new life and new future as individuals, and also for humanity. So that's why I do what I do, and that's why I'm thrilled to be doing this with you all at the Shift Network.
All right, beautiful. Thank you for that. And I want to mention once again that Rav Doniel is in Israel, so the internet connection over here in the States is just a little jumpy, but the course itself will be fine. We're using a different program for that. Let me ask a question here. Actually, there's a couple different people asking this one, and again, referring to the conversation that you had with Stephen Dynam, where you did the exercise where you asked people to imagine feeling love and then awe. And the question here, this is Nina's version of the question. She says, you ask people to remind themselves of a moment of love and awe in their lives. But what about people who don't have such memories? Will you be giving alternative instructions to create them?
Now, I want to know, I don't know if Nina is there on Facebook in real time or once upon a time, but a quick question, is that true for Nina? Is Nina saying she's never had that in her life? Now, I understand that some people don't. But Lisa, do you have real-time access to Nina and her download? Well, let's assume that Nina doesn't have. First of all, everybody has that, number one. Number two, some people have had enough trauma, enough heartache, that they either can't remember it or they can't emotionally access it. Meaning some people, the way humanity works is when we're convinced that we are unloved and unlovable, then even in moments in our life which show love, that show connection, we can't accept them, we push away from them. So that's number one. And we don't, and as we move into the future, we don't even remember them or acknowledge them because we didn't register them, right? Number one. Number two is some people, a little better option is they remember the time that their mother told them they loved them. They remember the time when they got married and they felt everyone around them with so much connection and warmth, but they're unable to feel it. So the question is how you work beyond that. So in brief, Nina, as you're watching this, I'm curious to know which one you would define yourself as. My guess is, as is always the guess, if you're asking the question, there's probably truth in it for you to some degree. So it could be one of the first two categories, number one. Number two is your soul, your neshama, the divine superconsciousness within you only knows love. It knows infinite, massive, expansive love. One of the ways we can access that infinite love within us is to awaken the finite love, the earthly love, the animal love, the memory of love. And we use that Kabbalistically in Chassidus as a springboard. We tune our soul in and say, remember that time with my husband, with my wife, with my child, with my partner. Remember that time of the success when we turned the company around and someone came and held me and said, yeah, I changed their life, and there was a deep loving connection. And then we awaken that within our animal soul, and then we actually pierce through that and open up and then bounce through that, leverage beyond that into this divine experience of love, number one. So that's how we get in there. If a person cannot bring that up, then there's two things to do. One is the infinite love is already within you anyway. So sometimes if we just quieten the noise of our mind in general, I will teach you specific techniques where you don't have to go low. You read it L'tzorach to go down to the animal love, the ego love, the self-love, the human love, the mundane love, to launch into the transcendent love. But we'll play with some techniques where we can just simply quieten our mind and open up the divine light within us. And I'll teach you some Kabbalistic names which help with that and often prove very powerful to basically circumvent the ego self completely and launch straight into that. That's number one. That's one way to get there. Another technique, another classic approach is that many people that can't open to the experience of love, it's because they have a trust issue or a deep fear issue. And that fear issue or trust issue is there in real time, and it's pushing into their chest, it's pushing into their stomach. And I'm just tuning into Nina a little to know what's going on there. But what that is doing, it's in real time stopping the flood of light and love coming in. So if you can't bring up a positive love from your memory, and you can't access above, it's usually because there's a level of trust issues, or feeling of betrayal, or feeling of unworthiness, or feeling of hurt, or feeling of vulnerability, or fear of rejection, that becomes so strong and present. Sometimes it's so present and consistent in a person's life that they become numb to it and don't even know it's there. What you can learn to do is use your das, a part of your consciousness, to in real time melt and release that. And if you in real time melt and release that enough and deeply enough, then what happens in that moment, if you just take the wall down, then suddenly you are able to remember that love, and suddenly you are able to access that transcendence within. So the answer to your question is, if you don't have those memories, you probably have those memories, but you can't remember them, you didn't register them, or you can intellectually remember it but not emotionally access it. Infinite love is still within you. You are still worthy of it, and it's a part of your consciousness. To access it, we may have to circumvent the ego altogether and bring it in and bring it down. Or alternatively, we may just have to go to who is the gatekeeper, that fear. That's called a klippah in Torah, that block and that shell, and release that and draw that down, and that will be enough to open a person up. So there's a few different approaches, and if Nina is online on Facebook, I'll check my Facebook shortly, or how she responds there on the Shift Facebook account, and I'd love to see if any of that spoke to her, makes sense to her, and whether it gives her hope in any way, and that's something that we can learn to practice together, God willing.
Okay, thank you for that. And yes, that is Nina from Facebook. That question came in live. So Nina, go ahead and respond if you'd like.
Real time.
And in the meantime, let's go to a question here from Sarah, who says, I felt in the past on occasions that I can channel, as you called it, that I'm sharing beauty and transcendence with the world, but cannot always do this, and creative endeavors feel forced or like I'm just recreating Hollywood plot lines. I want to channel, but can't force it. Any advice?
Well, the forcing is always the key word. I mean, the question is, with what part of ourself do we force? You can will it, but you can't force it. How's that for, a more nuanced use of words? There are ways to bring something in, but force is never the way. Anything that involves consciousness, you don't want to force, because all these techniques of higher transcendence, of inner emotional transformation, of removing blocks in the bodies, of bringing down psychic insight, they all involve skill sets of very extremely subtle and nuanced shifting of internal states. And what you're going to see is in the program that we learn together is the beginning of the program for the first 1 or 2 classes. I'm just going to teach you the names of the parts of your consciousness, and I'm going to teach you how to access them with your consciousness. I'm not going to teach you what to do with them. I'm just going to teach them they're there, because you need to know, if I am sick of writing Hollywood scripts, but I want to channel in something new, there are ways to do that, but they're very subtle places, and you have to learn how do you kind of bring that into that and then shift that. And if you're in a rough, what's called a gassidic, thick, dense part of consciousness, then you can't access that subtlety. That's why we always begin in a mindful state. For in our Torah tradition for 2,000 years, that's called Yishuv Hadas, the settling and returning to true consciousness. That's where we have to begin, in a subtle, open place to do any inner transformation or higher access, is because we need access to subtleties that we just can't hear in the roar of the normal noise of our mind. With that in mind, to answer the question, when we force something, force is way too rough and grotesque and dense. And the force usually comes from ego. It's usually force that it's the ego that says, I want this to happen. I want this to happen now. If this doesn't happen, then I will never get that breakthrough. I'll never make that money. I'll never make the success. I won't be creative. I want to be creative. Why can't I be creative? I'm always a failure. I can never do it. That person does it. I want to be like that person. All this kind of noise makes me want to force. And it's the ego that forces it. There is a will that you're going to learn called Das Tachton. There's a part of your consciousness that wills with a pure will, that desires with a pure desire. I want to create art. I want to create a beautiful film and impact millions of people, not to make money and be successful and marry the handsome guy, the pretty girl, and not all the ego trips around it, not to be the best filmmaker, to be a visionary. It's because I truly sense the value of the medium to make a beautiful and profound impact in the world. I see enough darkness in the world. I'd like to tell stories that bring light, to make contribution, to tell authentic journeys, et cetera, et cetera. And that place doesn't force, but it's skillful enough, and with the right craft, it knows how to bring this together, turn that on, open that up, and bring that down. It doesn't mean that it happens every single time, guaranteed, but when you have the skill set and you develop your craft, you'll see that you can massively increase the amount of times that it can happen and the rapidity of how far you get there. Way back in my early years as an artist, as a filmmaker, as a theater director, as an actor, I used to live for those moments of divine inspiration. I didn't call it divine inspiration, when you got direct downloads of scripts, of ideas, of shows, of music, whatever it was. But they were always like once every year and a half or something. Now I do know the secrets to get that on a regular daily level. There are secrets you can learn. To be honest with you, we can't cover all of that in 8 weeks, but you will definitely understand that inner world and how to begin to reach for it after 8 weeks. You can't force, but you can will. And when you will skillfully with craft and practice, you will see the inspiration comes more powerfully, more consistently, more at will, but not at force. I hope that answers your question.
I believe it did. Thank you so much for that. Let's do, we're almost out of time. Let's see if we can squeeze in one more question. This is from Meredith, who says, recently, everywhere I turn, I see the idea of inherited trauma, culturally, nutritionally, genetically. And I was wondering if inherited trauma is something you see the truth in, and if so, what responsibility, if any, do you believe individuals have to work through said trauma for themselves and for future generations?
This is a very deep subject, and there's no way I can do justice to this in the next 2 minutes. I will say, Lisa and Meredith, that in the highest day of the Jewish year, which is called Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, and it's a day of such immense download of love and compassion that gets flooded into ourselves and flooded into the world, that's the day of fasting, and that's the day where we do an action of return, what's called tshuva, and we own and identify and release every mistake, every error, every sin, every falling moment we've had in our lives, and we take full ownership from it. And as we do that, then we release ourselves from it, and we receive this abundance of love, of forgiveness, of light, which actually generates, mystically speaking, the light and the blessing that we and the whole of the world will receive for all of the year. It's the download is coming in, and if we cleanse ourselves, then we can rise up and receive and become channels for it. It's a very profound day. And on that day, as we are doing, we do this tapping motion over our heart as a release mechanism. We may learn some of that in the course. And as we do this tapping, what we say is, I am taking responsibility for the mistakes of myself and the mistakes of our forefathers and the mistakes of generations. We constantly take ownership and release that from ourselves and for many generations. And it's absolutely axiomatic in the Torah mystical tradition that that we are the sum total of all the generations, and we carry the burden and blessing and opportunity. When we make mistakes, we carry those mistakes ourselves, and for better or worse, we implant those mistakes in the consciousness of our children. And that sounds awful and overwhelming, but the truth is that the goal of life is spiritual responsibility. The more we take responsibility, the more we elevate ourselves and elevate our world, we elevate our family and future generations. The more we make mistakes and the more we fall, and falling is okay, but not taking ownerships and hardwiring that into our being and bringing the spiritual purity and pain that causes, that becomes hardwired into the next generation. Now, that's not about a guilt trip, but it's about incredible understanding of what is consciousness and what is the effect of consciousness beyond ourselves into others. And there's a concentric circle of self, of spouse, of children, of parents, and moving out to communities, to countries, to the whole of the world. And ultimately, our consciousness goes all the way. It's not just about family, previous and past generations. When you open your consciousness with a mitzvah, with an act of profound spiritual depth and of intent, it absolutely affects consciousness and people's opportunities all around the world. And this happens. So in brief, with no time left, and Lisa wants to wrap this up. So with no time left, a person can actually be the buck stops here for yourself and previous generations. There's much more in Kabbalah. I don't want to get into this, really, it's not the right forum, but in Kabbalah it's very, very clear that actually the consciousness of the parents at the time of conception of the child actually deeply affects the personality of the child. And that is a very profound teaching. And I don't even go into the complexity and beauty and profundity of that, but that's also in there. So at the end of the day, we have to know that we do affect our children through our actions. We are the children of our parents and grandparents all the way back. And we can, by turning around our lives, by owning the trauma, whether it's ours, whether it's somebody else's, was created many generations back the stream of life, we can transform many generations. There's an axiom in the Torah and the Talmud that the actions of the children elevate the souls of the parents. Because when our parents had pain and trauma, and then we turn them around in our life with great force, the force that it takes not just to fight your own battles, but your family's battles. But if you have the pain, if you've been given the burden, you absolutely have the capacity to take it on and turn around. And then what we can literally do is lift up generations and create whole new futures. That is true. It's more than I can go into right now. That's a taste of some of the profound things over time we'll be able to learn together, God willing.
All right. Wow. I wish I'd asked that question 20 minutes ago because I'm fascinated by this topic.
Okay. We'll get to that another time.
Yes, definitely. We will actually, I'll talk to you later about this. But in the meantime, we do need to wrap it up. This has been just a fascinating hour. I want to thank our viewers for being with us today and for all of your really wonderful questions. Once again, it's called The Divine Map of Human Consciousness, and it starts Wednesday, July 24th. And again, you can visit divinemapofhumanconsciousness.com to learn more and to register. But before we cut you loose, Rav Doniel, what are your final words for our viewers?
I hope this has been an interesting hour. On behalf of the internet everywhere, I'm sorry if it wasn't so smooth. But life is never smooth. But if you hold on and listen deeply, there's always good stuff there. I'm looking forward to a more intimate setting where I get to know everybody involved and we can learn together and open up deep teachings from my tradition. I don't care if you're Jewish or not Jewish. This is a universal teaching. This is a gift to all of humanity. I've studied many wisdom teachings from many wisdom traditions. And for my own self and my own journey, I've never seen anything as profound and beautiful, holistic as this. And I'm so excited to be sharing it with you. I hope you join us on the journey and look forward to learning more about each other and much deeper about ourselves and reality as well. Looking forward very much. Thank you for the opportunity shift. And thank you so much, Lisa, for hosting this great event.
All right. Wow. And I want to thank you once again, Rav Doniel Katz. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you for being here with us.
With great joy. Over and out.
All right. And once again, I want to thank everyone who joined us today. On behalf of all of us at the Shift Network, I wish you well and look forward to having you on this course or perhaps another one in the future. Have a great day, everyone.